ADHD Experts broadcast. We hope everyone is staying safe and staying well. We are pleased to have Linda Roggli here to talk about how to simplify the aspects of our lives that have been turned upside down or sideways by the pandemic. Before we get started, let me note a couple of housekeeping items. Those of you tuned into the live webinar may download the slides now by clicking on the Event Resources section of your webinar screen. And if you're interested in the Certificate of Attendance option, look for instructions in the email you receive around an hour after the live broadcast. For those of you listening in replay or podcast mode, you can visit attitudemag.com and search podcast 339 to access the slides, the webinar replay, and the Certificate of Attendance option. Now for today's topic, resetting our lives. The new year offers us an opportunity to declutter our mental and physical space against the backdrop of a strangely changed world. Our ADHD tendency is to complexify life, but we can learn to simplify things. For many, simplifying a lifetime or just a year or even a month of mental and physical clutter is a daunting proposition, but it is possible to achieve. Coach Linda Roggli will give us the tools and perspective to better understand the challenges of simplifying our lives and how to meet those challenges. Linda is a certified professional coach for ADHD women 40 and better. She is the co-founder of the ADHD Palooza for Women and Parents and the creator of Get Organized, an interactive 4-week program to help declutter physical space. Her book, Confessions of a Diva, Midlife in the Non-Linear Lane, won first prize for women's issues in the Next Generation Independent Book Awards. She is the creator of TAD Talks for ADA, and it is its webinar chair. You can reach Linda at adiva.net or adhdpalooza.com. So with all that being said, I'll turn it over to Linda. Thanks so much for being here today.
Thank you, Wayne. And I keep complaining. I just want to let you guys know that it's not fair that he's not on camera. I just want you guys to know that. However, nonetheless, we are going to jump right in, shall we? I just want to tell you that just because I am talking about simplifying doesn't mean I got this all together. So just so you know, this is not an easy task. So first, I just want to talk, just so you kind of know where we're going here. Because this is a very big topic, we're only going to cover a piece of it here. So maybe we can do some more parts of this later on. But I first want to set the scene for kind of what we've been going through. So in the last year, we've kind of had our ADHD year of more. And I don't mean more in the sense of, oh, it's so nice. It's more things to worry about, for heaven's sake. We've had more things to remember to do. We have to put on our masks. We have to social distance. We have to make sure that we are being safe and keeping our loved ones safe as well. More days to fill with things that you didn't expect because we are not going out anywhere. More time to think, obsess, sometimes even ruminate, for heaven's sake. And more people to grieve, sadly. Sometimes those who have died from COVID, some of who have died amidst this COVID experience and has changed dramatically how we grieve and even host funerals. More lessons to teach. And certainly if you have children at home who have been, you're homeschooling suddenly, didn't expect to do that, we have to learn to teach them, and then we have to learn how to teach them, but we also have lessons to learn ourselves. They have more piles to be attacked. Sometimes we attack them. Sometimes we don't attack them. Maybe we'll have a little more inspiration to do that after our webinar. And more Zoom, oh my goodness, than we ever imagined possible in our entire lives, right? And some of you probably hadn't even heard of Zoom until this. I knew Zoom when it wasn't even cool to have Zoom. But you guys, now everybody knows it, baby. And I guess we also needed to learn more patience, much more patience that we need to learn. And we can read this two ways: more patience to learn things, but also more patience. And that's not an easy thing for ADHD folks, that's for sure. All righty. Oh, you know what? I just lost my ability to move the slides, but that's all right. I will. Yeah. But just tell me where am I going for that, if you don't mind? Just tell me again, Wayne, because I usually
So you can click the next button in the top left corner. Yeah.
I was looking at the bottom. Thank you so much for that. So thank you for advancing the slide for me. And yes, everything is more complicated. We're talking about simplification, but everything's more complicated. Many of us are ordering our groceries from online instead of going to a store to get them ourselves. And that sounds like that would be a good thing, right? Oh, yeah, I don't have to go to the grocery store, except they screw things up. They don't bring the things that they said they were going to bring, or they bring avocados instead of artichokes. It's just a very different way to do this. Even visiting people through glass, we can't reach out and hug, if you will. And even getting your hair cut, for heaven's sake. And remember, back in the day, the hair salons were all shut down. Barbershops, everything was shut down. Now it's a very different kind of thing with lots of plastic and sanitizing. So the truth is, don't we like complicated? ADHD folks love things that are complicated, but not this kind of complicated, frankly. What I've noticed when talking to my clients and also friends and family is that the reaction to this has been on two extremes. I don't know what to do with myself, so I'm going to watch TV and I'm going to, munch on, Cheetos and I'm bored. I can't go out. I can't do the things I used to do. And I just feel like I'm kind of stuck. The other extreme of that is that people are busier than they've ever been because of what I just mentioned about the fact that their kids are at home, their loved one is at home, their partner is working at home, you are working at home, for heaven's sake, and all that stuff. Plus, we're fixing all the meals and doing all the laundry. If you had help before, you don't have that help. If you had an assistant, et cetera, et cetera. And I will say that there is something in between that I didn't put on this slide that I regretted afterwards, and that is that some of us are really grateful for this kind of break, this kind of lull in our lives. It's allowed us to begin to understand ourselves a little bit better, allow ourselves, as I heard yesterday, to understand our own tempo, if you will. But mostly I hear the two extremes. It's like, I'm really busy, or I don't know what to do. I'm just going to go to bed at, 4 o'clock in the morning and get up at, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Some people at least do that. It's led to a lot of roller coaster emotions. And certainly anxiety is one of them. Anxiety, as it amplifies, it can turn into depression and even despair about, is this ever going to be over? Or is anything ever going to be normal again, and whatever normal is, right? Sometimes it's anger. It's like, let's get this dang thing over with and let's get everything handled. And sometimes it's, going to bed at 4 o'clock in the morning and getting up at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. It's fear. Like, just let this go away, for heaven's sake. So it really is kind of enough to blow your mind, whether you have ADHD or not, but in particular when you have ADHD. So why has it been so difficult? Well, it's kind of a duh question, but think about this, that when you have a crisis, you want somebody with ADHD there, because that's when all of our neurons are firing 100% and we are getting things. When my dad had a heart attack, I was the one that called the police that said, don't tow his car because he had to leave where he's in I was the one who thought of all those details. I get it. And everybody else was kind of like, you did what? I'm good. We are good. However, we're not so good with chronic crises. The things that keep going on and on and on. And that's exactly what this has been doing, right? So that means our ADHD neurology, our ADHD brains are just being pushed to their limits all the time. And where does all that start? So I'm going to do a quick little brief explanation of why our ADHD brains get activated so quickly. And most of you probably heard of the amygdala. I had heard of the amygdala too, but it wasn't until my research for this presentation that I realized we had two of those babies. They're called amygdalae when we have more than one of them. And they're tiny little almond-shaped pieces of our brains that are in some respects right behind our ears a little bit, but deep inside our brain, as you can see from this illustration. We have one in each brain hemisphere, and the research shows that they're not quite sure what the difference is. They may control different pieces of the alert response, but they're not sure. But what is very clear is that this is the part of our brain that says, danger, something's happening. We need to be paying attention to this. Oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. But this is unconscious. We don't know when our amygdala gets activated. If there's a branch scratching against the window and we don't know, we're alone in the house and, it's kind of a scary night, our amygdala is the one that's saying, what's that? Oh my goodness, there might be something, someone scratching on that's our amygdala saying that, right? But our conscious brain remember, this is the limbic system back here. So that's the old brain. And our conscious brain is kind of trying to think, well, I don't know, it could be. So what happens immediately, unconsciously, is that our heart rate increases, the pupils of our eyes dilate because we're trying to get more information in. Our heart sends more blood to our muscles because it thinks that our muscles are going to start moving, whether it's to run away or whether it's to engage and fight. And so there are 4 F's, they call them. It's fighting, which I just mentioned. We can freeze because it's just paralyzed. It's like, oh my gosh, I hope nobody sees me, and then the danger will, go right past me. Fleeing, running away from it. Or there's another one that some people talk about is flocking together. And I just got chickens in the face of the pandemic, so I can assure you that chickens do exactly that. And just as a curiosity, do you know that chickens sleep with only half of their brain to sleep at one time so that their other eye can actually watch out for danger? So I don't know whether that's an amygdala, but it's certainly vibrant in chickens, that's for sure. So let's say that amygdala, both of them, the amygdalae, activate. They sense danger out of the corner of your eye, or they feel a difference in the temperature of the room, whatever it is. We don't know what's going on until it gets to our prefrontal cortex. And that's up here in the front part of our brain, the frontal lobes, and the very, very front part of that is the prefrontal cortex. And you've probably heard about that so many times about ADHD, that's where a lot of the executive function happens, the things like planning and organization and all those kinds of things, rational thought, if you will. So that's where our prefrontal cortex says, oh, never mind. It's just the wind. Don't worry about that. But if our prefrontal cortex says, it might be something, then the amygdala takes over and we actually are moved into action, which is exactly the appropriate thing to do. Let me just be clear about this. The amygdala is not a false prophet. The amygdala is just alert, and it's our prefrontal cortex that moderates that. It's like, I don't know if you guys remember Lost in Space, because that's been a long, long time ago, but there was a robot that went around saying, danger, Will Robinson, danger. So I think we should call that robot, even though I don't know its name, we should probably call it the amygdala for us, actually. Keep in mind that the prefrontal cortex is the front of our brain, and that's the last thing that developed when we were evolving as a species. So this is a great picture, I think, which shows kind of the angle of our forehead. Back in the day, the earliest versions of us, if you will, the amygdala was pretty important, and the prefrontal cortex was doing almost no, or the frontal lobes actually at that point, was doing almost no check-in, if you will, no reality check. And then gradually and more and more, the front of our skulls became more and more rounded to accommodate the prefrontal cortex as well as the frontal lobes, so that now we have a much bigger frontal lobe and prefrontal cortex, which means that we now have more inhibition. You've heard people talk about the inhibition response in ADHD tends to be a little sluggish, and that's one of the things we can talk about here. However, I don't want to add ADHD into this yet, simply because we want to understand that we have 6 seconds to react. When our amygdala or amygdalae say, danger, Will Robinson, then it takes 6 seconds. That's an eternity for your brain. The amygdalae are doing this unconsciously. We don't recognize consciously what's happening. And for 6 seconds, when it gets up to the prefrontal cortex, and it doesn't have a clue what's going on. So immediately we're responding from that old limbic brain. Some people call it the lizard brain. That piece of us that says, you got to do something. You've got to break down in tears. You've got to get angry. You've got to, all those emotions that I mentioned before. So if you act in that time, you're going to actually act directly from amygdala. And that's what they call an amygdala hijack. That was a term that was coined 15 years ago or so by a psychologist. His name was Daniel Goleman. I think it's how you pronounce it, Goleman. And I put the name of his book down on the footnotes right there. It's the beginning of the conversation about emotional intelligence. So you're going to actually respond from that, I got to do something, catching your breath kind of thing, if the prefrontal cortex has not caught up yet. However, when we are in this chronic hijack of the amygdala constantly overpowering what's going on up here, saying it's okay, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay, it just releases that cortisol and adrenaline again and again and again and again. And now we can talk about the fact that ADHD folks, the prefrontal cortex doesn't function quite as well as folks without ADHD. And anyone's prefrontal cortex is a little diminished when we are under constant stress, this constant amygdala hijack. So what happens is, for both us ADHD folks and non-ADHD folks, is we end up with short-term memory issues. Lack of focus. Sound familiar? Yeah. Emotions stay high, right? Because we're at the mercy of those little amygdalae back there. And cortisol and adrenaline are flowing all the time. And that really, really, really is a negative thing for your health. And it's also exhausting. As I mentioned, it could just really wear out your adrenal system. We won't talk about adrenals now because we don't have time to talk about that. But just know that being on that high alert system for so many months has just bogged down our ADHD brains, and for exactly the reasons I mentioned. So I invite you to think about creating a calmer, more simple way of approaching our ADHD lives, no matter what has happened outside, whether it's COVID or, there's been lots of things happening last week and November and Christmas and holidays and all kinds of things that have happened to push us. So I invite you to calm down just a bit, but how the heck do we do that? So I love to me, the master of simplicity, which is simplify, 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 came from Henry David Thoreau many, many years ago and his Walden Pond experiment. He said, never look back unless you're planning to go that way. And I don't think any of us would want to look back at this point. So let's look at life through new eyes. In this case, maybe lots of eyes, right? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, even just one, right? So let's go back to that 6-second pause. If we can pause, because you've heard lots of people talk about the pause for ADHD, right? And I got it. I heard it, but I kind of felt it was like holding my breath and, trying to hold on for that pause. First, I had to be aware that my amygdala was even acting up because, remember, it's unconscious. But my emotions it was like I had to sit on them for a little bit. So what I learned was if we can think complex thoughts for a very, very short time, those 6 seconds to reality, if you will. And I'm talking about complex thoughts in terms of intellectual thoughts, right? Things that are like facts, for instance. So it's like count to 10, won't do it. That's so rote that it's like nursery rhymes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We don't really think about it. It's kind of like, reaching out and opening the door, when you come home. It's if you go out, that's true. But we need something that's a little more complex. So for instance, naming 6 of the 7 dwarfs in alphabetical order. Now you might be able to name the 7 dwarfs or 6 of them, but putting them in alphabetical order requires higher level thinking, right? Which pulls you out of the emotion. List 6 cities that begin with the letter P, for instance. No matter what continent you are on, you definitely have 6 cities somewhere in your memory that begin with the letter P. Or I love this scattered counting with the opposite of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you pick random numbers and say them. I tend to say them out loud because my ADHD brain can't hang on to them. I think that must be working memory, I suppose. But just saying random numbers, like I wrote down here, 87, 23. But remember, I'm not going to have these numbers in front of me. So instead, I'm going to be thinking of, 149. It requires more thought to put those numbers together than it does to put them in sequence. The point here is just to keep your brain intellectually occupied so that your prefrontal cortex can catch up. So that the signals from the amygdala can get to the prefrontal cortex, and your prefrontal cortex can say, no problem. It's just branches on the window. It's just the wind. It's just the curtain flapping. So those 6 seconds are crucial. And I will tell you, I've done a lot of study about this, and I'd never heard about this. So it may just be that I've done study in the wrong areas, but I appreciate knowing that, because as this illustration shows, I want my prefrontal cortex controlling what's going on, not my amygdala, unless there is serious danger, unless someone's knocking my door down or someone's threatening me, et cetera, et cetera. So most of the time, my danger to your amygdala can happen in many forms. It can be, oh my gosh, that person doesn't believe the same thing I believe, I'm in danger. So they're very subtle, and your amygdala is like all the antennae are up all the time for that. So we can't change our ADHD, but we can make different choices about what we listen to in our brains. And then in turn, the things that we act on, right? So let's talk a little bit about simplicity. Back to Henry David Thoreau again. He said, our lives are frittered away by detail. I say, let your affairs be as 2 or 3, not 100 or 1,000. So what does that mean for us? Instead of paying attention to 50 things at one time, pay attention to only 5. I will give us 5 instead of 2 or 3. So there's jillions of apples in that very, very faint background there, but we're just going to be able to pay attention to 2 of them because those are the important ones. And of course, remember that we have trouble deciding what's important to pay attention to. So that makes it's hard for us to narrow this down. So how do we pare down if we want more possibilities and more stimulation, et cetera, et cetera? Well, I think the first way is to kind of simplify our overwhelm, right? Because even in isolation, even when we are quarantined or separated or more likely to be home rather than somewhere else and being careful about where we're going in public, we tend to overcommit. Well, I've talked to several people. These are absolutely real life examples. Baking cookies for the socially distanced birthday party next door, for their 80-year-old person next door. Picking up groceries for the folks at church. Fixing the shower. Oh, I can fix that shower for you. No problem. I'll come over. Welcome. I'll wear my mask, et cetera, et cetera. Or pet sitting. Well, a friend goes to the beach for the weekend. Don't we wish we were going to the beach? But we said yes to all these things. Heck, we may have even suggested them ourselves, but we've said yes. So the answer is, just say no. Back to Nancy Reagan and just say no. And her drug advocation, of course. No in any language is no, but we don't like saying no because why? We like to make people happy. We are kind of people pleasers, to tell you the truth. Like, we want to give people presents. We want them to be happy with us. And there's a lot of reasons behind that. We want people to be happy with us because so many times we've disappointed them. And it may not be the same people, but it still sticks in our ADHD brains that I did this wrong. I've made somebody disappointed. I have not followed through, et cetera, et cetera. So I want to do something extra nice. I want to say yes. And unfortunately, sometimes we stumble even when we say yes. But the answer is, how do we say no in a way that doesn't hurt someone's feelings? If someone says, can you bake cookies for the 80-year-old's birthday parties because we're going to have it outdoors and we're going to sing to them and blah, blah, blah. Are you going to say no? You can say no, but how do you do that? And I'm not going to go through all of these. Wayne, I forgot to mention to you that I'm actually sending you a handout that goes with this. So I'm going to have all of this on the handout. And I know you're going to provide the slides as well, but I'm going to have these things put just in a little succinct 2 pages.
All right.
So some ways that you can say no are, sorry, it won't work for me now, but I wish you all the best. Or I just got too much on my plate right now. Or, I just don't think I'm the right person for this. Have you checked with so forth and so on? And if they check with that person, then it comes back to, unfortunately, I just can't do that. So I'm just slammed. So there are ways to say no in a way that allows you to maintain your integrity. And by the way, none of these things can be lies. Thanks for asking. I'm already booked for that night. You better be booked for that night. So I don't know about being booked for that night now, however, but nonetheless, the point is that you want to do this with integrity. And yes, you may disappoint someone, but you also need to stand for yourself as well. So remember that you're as important as the person you're saying yes or no to. You are as important. The thing is, we do this to ourselves. So sometimes we have to say no to us because, as I mentioned, we may be the one that said, oh, I'll fix your shower. Let me bake the cookie. Oh, da. So how do we do that? How do we say no to ourselves? There are questions you can ask yourself. And I will go through these because these are important. You are already using every single minute of every day of your life right now. Something is happening 24/7, 365. You have something going on. You are filling those up. So the question is, if you're going to take something else on, if you're going to bake cookies or cupcakes or whatever it is for the birthday party, you're going to have to give up something because you're already using that time. So what is it that you're going to give up to be able to insert the baking cookies time into your life? It sounds really harsh, but I got to tell you, it's really true. Because if you don't decide, then that whatever that was in that place to begin with is just going to get pushed aside, right? And then you're going to be in like, oh my God, I can't do this kind of, now I'm behind. And then that's one reason we don't follow through. We let people down and let ourselves down. So the question is, how important is this? Have I yearned for it for a lifetime, or did I just get this in my head about 5 minutes ago? And is this I just deserve this because I've been so good for so long. And then the question is it worth it? And if you're aiming for simplicity, how does that support that goal? And is it a distraction that we really can do without? So remember that we like thinking complicated thoughts. Even if there's a straight, short path, we don't want to do that. It's the pretzel syndrome. It's all the way around, right? And it's really fun to do that, to indulge that in our brains. But it fills our brain with so many details. So that I mentioned earlier in this description that we complexify our problems to make things more difficult because it's more fun. It's, I think it's really strange that we don't like other people. Can't hardly follow people saying, first you go here and then you turn right and then you go 53 feet and then we can't follow that. But we don't mind having that for ourselves. We don't mind us saying, oh, but first I go this, and because no one's telling us. We're coming up with it ourselves. But when we get caught in that, it's like, okay, well, I thought I was going to go here, but it didn't work. So I have to, then we can get in that rut of thinking, right? So this kind of round and round and round thinking is that we keep trying to figure it out and it doesn't work. And then and then you begin to feel bad. And it's like, then you get tense and you can usually tell, right? Obsession mode is about being irritable and having a short fuse and, could be emotional, back to the emotional the amygdala hijack again. One of the things that I have heard for many, many years is about thought stopping. And there's a little controversy about whether this worked or not, but it's worth a try. You might as well try it. I put it in here just because if you can notice that you're in that mode, you're kind of in that rut kind of thing. Pay attention to exactly what you're thinking about. I can't figure this out. I can't figure this out. So say aloud to yourself, stop. Or Jack Canfield says, cancel. So you actually and have the image of that stop sign so that you are actually interrupting that thought. And another version that I learned in my coaching training was, thank you for sharing, you're excused. We don't need to hear from you anymore, this thought of my brain. And some people in the thought stopping piece have a rubber band and you snap it, you wear it on your wrist and you snap it against your wrist to put a negative association with the ruminating thoughts. And some people, and then you're supposed to think positive thoughts. And I don't know whether that works or not, but I'm giving it to you because it might work for you. So how do we calm down that busy brain of yours? Meditation. Oh, yeah. Oh, not that again. Are you kidding me? But I just want to show you a couple of studies. Number one, years ago, 2005, it showed that meditation makes the prefrontal cortex thicker. How about that? And when the prefrontal cortex is thicker, it makes it work better. And it tends to thin with age. And then the one on the right-hand side, Dr. Sarah Lazar, who was the person who did that 2005 study, she said that meditation prevents the prefrontal cortex from shrinking because our brains, I hate to say, get smaller as we get older. They shrink. Oh, my God. So it counteracts aging is the point. And the center study that was done, it says it actually, and this is really big, strengthens the connection between the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex. So we actually get better at being able to get to that 6 seconds. Maybe it'll even end up being 5 seconds. I don't know. I made that up. That was not in the research. Thich Nhat Hanh actually introduced mindfulness to the Western world, if you will. He's Vietnamese, and he wrote a huge number of books. Somebody gave me one a long, long time ago that was a little kind of a skinny Reader's Digest version. And what I always remember from it was he talked about washing the dishes. And it's like, yeah, well, that's interesting. That's what he thought too. Not very interesting, right? But mindfulness is being present right now. Where are you right now? I'm in the webinar. I'm in the webinar. I'm in the webinar. What he said to himself when he was washing the cup was, I'm washing the teacup. I'm washing the teacup. I'm washing the teacup. I'm washing the teacup. So we are here right in this moment. And when we're in that moment, that counts as meditation. So I'm going to just ask you for 10 seconds, just 10 seconds. I promise I will measure it. Notice where you are. What are you doing? And then just do that. Don't be checking email. Just do exactly what you're doing. 10 seconds. Are you ready? Here we go. Okay. Wow. Even stopping for 10 seconds for me makes me slow down a little bit. It makes me more conscious of where I am. So wash the teacup if you're able to do that. There are some simplicity encouragers, several of them, and these are also in the handout. Dance it out. Any exercise doesn't make any difference whether it's dance or not. If you like to run, that's great. If you bounce on a trampoline, whatever you like to do. But remember, anything that gets blood to our brains is also getting oxygen to our brains. So anything that gets our blood moving is going to help with that simplicity, and it's going to help with calming our busy brain down. This is the suggestion from one of my clients. She said there's a wonderful yoga instructor called Adrienne, and it's ADRIEN. She has a 30-day yoga challenge going on right now. It's free. It's on YouTube. If you check her out, she says, I never thought of myself as a yoga person, but I love this yoga. She's just very, very approachable. So you don't have to do all these twisty, pretzel-y kind of things. Hugging someone. And of course, you got to hug someone that's in your bubble, of course, but it releases oxytocin, and that counteracts the epinephrine and lowers stress response. So that can help simplify your brain and calm it down. Doing something creative, which is what I've illustrated here, especially artwork. And you know how popular those adult coloring books are. They don't work for me because they make me more tense because I'm not coloring in the lines and so forth and so on. But I talked to someone yesterday who said that was her first impression as well. And now she's learned to not be quite so perfectionistic about it. If you've seen one of my other webinars about perfectionism, you can order all those things online, pens and pencils and things. And it's something about the repetitive piece. It's kind of like I'm washing the teacup. So it's not, I'm going to color this while I'm watching this and I'm taking care of that. It's being involved in exactly that thing, mindfulness again. And aromatherapy works too. If smells are not a problem for you, aromatherapy can be wonderful. So I think Wandering with a Mazey Motion is from Kubla Khan. And I always think of Mazey Motion as just kind of being lackadaisical, and it's okay to have floating thoughts. We need them because you're not going to stop an ADHD brain from doing that anyway. But that doesn't mean we can't come back to mindfulness. So we can take a little meandering motion and then we can come back again. However, we still need some stimulation. So what I have known about but forgot, frankly, back to working memory, is the Mozart Effect. And this is actually a study that was done for ADHD adults, about ADHD adults. And what they found was that listening to Mozart can, especially sonatas, can actually improve our mood and our energy level. So instead of having to have all this stuff going on, we listen to Mozart and it will re-energize us. And this study was, again, specific to ADHD adults. And of course, I wanted to try it immediately. So I had to go through the entire study to find out what piece of music they used. And just for our information, it was Mozart's Piano Sonata for 4 hands, obviously a duet. So I tried it. I don't know whether I felt better after or not. Maybe I'll try it again. All right, so let's look at the physical parallel to mind clutter. And that is, this is the this is the basement that one of my friends came home to at the beginning of COVID. So I just have to say, thank goodness for Zoom virtual backgrounds. That's all I got to say. So the one on the left is the fantasy room. That's not where I live at all, but it's really pretty. And then the one on the right is my actual office with my dog sleeping in the background and all the clutter and all that kind of good stuff. So I'm really thrilled that it was there. But the truth is that I really need to declutter, because decluttering my stuff declutters my brain as well. Having all those piles sitting around is just like, I need you to put me away, oh my God, or stepping over them. And it's kind of chronic, and we begin to not see it after a while. But when we came home, we really noticed at first when we first came home. So I don't know whether you know much about feng shui or whether you believe in it, but it doesn't make any difference, because the first principle is about decluttering. If we get things decluttered and things are much more smooth and uncluttered on the surface, then our brains are much calmer and we live in a much, much more present life. So the first thing I want to suggest is that you acknowledge the mess, acknowledge the piles. Like, hello, are you kidding me? We just get really discouraged. So it's like, I don't want to think about this anymore. So first things first, get things off of the floor that are in your way. Do not step over piles. First of all, it's dangerous. Trust me, I live experience of breaking my wrist from tripping over a pile in the basement. So please don't do that. And acknowledge, yes, there's a pile of newspapers from 2013 in front of my sofa. Okay, well, it's there now, right? So it's kind of like the amygdala thing. It's like 6 seconds. If we know what's going on there, then we can train ourselves to say, okay, you know what? It's there. What's the next step in all that? Well, you got to narrow your focus, because a lot of folks I talk to, because Wayne mentioned that I do have this organizing program that I started right after last year's webinar about this time. And that was about organizing. So if you need some more information about organizing, you might want to watch that webinar as well, because I think that it went into more detail than this. But it still said, narrow your focus. Everything's a mess, but you got to work on one thing at a time. One thing, and not even 2 or 3. You don't even get to do 2 or 3 like Thoreau. So even if there's 100 things, start with 1, and then set aside a specific time and honor it with for no more than 2 hours work on it. That's about the limit for us. And I apologize, my fax machine kicked on. When does anybody ever have a fax machine kick on? Excuse me. And then before you start, take a couple of nice deep breaths to allow yourself to center in the space, and then start with the very top layer, because that's usually the new stuff, right? Do the trash first. My friend Lisa, who does Organize 365, says trash. Walk all the way around the room and pick up all the trash. Let me see if I can get this off. No. All right. Then pick up stuff that already has a home. You know, there's a lot of things that you just need to be put away. Some things we don't have a home for, but a lot of things do. And then if you're interrupted, leave yourself some breadcrumbs and say, oh, this is what I was going to do next, so that when you come back, you don't have to think about it all over again. Think about your home as a container. Think about it as a suitcase, really, except it's a big suitcase. If you try to put too much stuff in a suitcase, number one, it's not going to close. Or if you can get it closed, it might pop open, or it even breaks the locks. It's the same thing with your home or a drawer or a closet. You can stuff things in there and stuff things, and you slam the door shut and hope things don't fall out when you open it again. But there's going to come a limit to when you can't close the door or you can't get the suitcase closed. So you want to pare down, not just to that space where you can close the door, but you want to pare down so that you can close the door and you have a little breathing space. Because what happens when you buy another t-shirt and it doesn't have a place? Because everything needs a home. So if you can give yourself a little breathing space, that's a great thing for you to be able to do. And it's really hard to do. It takes a lot of courage. So a lot of us have stuff. I don't know what to do with this. I know I should save it, but it doesn't have a home and I don't know where to put it. And I don't know what to do with it. And I haven't used it, but I know I need to save it. Put it in a box and seal the box, and then write open and a year from now. And if you haven't had to go look for that stuff, and you might want to put a label on it and say, this is what's in here. I mean, write on there whatever is in there. If you haven't opened the box before next New Year's, you can probably get rid of all of it. You probably don't even need to open it. So I know that's really, that's amygdala kind of things. I encourage you to start, and if your bedroom's fine, then don't worry about this, but I encourage you to start with a simplicity oasis. And usually that is our bedroom. So if you go in your bedroom, you go hang up all of your clothes, because a lot of us have clothes everywhere. Things that, well, I could wear that again, right? Or I don't know what, that needs to go in the dirty clothes, but this one, and I didn't put the laundry away, all that stuff. So hang up your clothes, get your clothes put away. And sometimes that shows that we have too many clothes. So that means a decluttering process. Make your bed. People are like, why should I make my bed when I just have to get in it again? But try making your bed. It makes it much more, again, uncluttered. Clean out from underneath the bed. I know you don't see it, but there's still stuff there that's probably in the back of your brain bugging you. Declutter your bedside table. So we end up dishes and books and whatever else accumulates there. Then if you have your office in your bedroom, screen it so that you don't have, there's work and work and work and work, so it's not distracting you. Because a lot of times I've been in hotel rooms in the middle of the night and I'll get up and go work because their office is right. My office is literally in the same room with me. And it's not at my home, but I've also been known to get up in the middle of the night and go down to my office, but that's another topic. So screen it. And if you can't see it, it's not so bad. So if you don't have time to declutter, try just putting a sheet or a blanket over piles of stuff, because even that is just calmer. And I know it sounds like, well, that's not really good because that's just hiding it. Yeah, it is. It's hiding it so that you can be calmer and allow your brain to be more simple, all right? Not that you have a simple brain. Simplicity is what I'm talking about. Even if you have a teeny tiny little space, it can be calming as well. This is, I imagine this is a studio. You can see a little piece of a sofa there, a divider between the bed and the rest of the room, so that even small spaces, even if you say, well, I don't have room for that, but even small spaces can be calming. So what we're aiming for is having uncluttered sleep, which nourishes us, which can be very difficult for a lot of folks with ADHD. Some people blame their medication. Some people blame their busy brains. No matter what it is, light blocking curtains are really important. I now have them in all of my bedrooms. I can't believe what a difference it makes. A white noise machine is wonderful, and I will actually add that to my handout, the kind of white noise machine that I found to be best. If you haven't changed your pillow for a couple of years, please do. I don't usually recommend brand names, but I'm going to do it this time. Coop Home Goods is everywhere now, but their pillow is the best pillow I've ever slept on in my entire life. Why? Because it is adjustable. You can take some of the stuffing out if it's too high, and they send along another pack, a little additional stuffing. So if it's not high enough, you can stuff some more stuff in there. And remember that if you've had your pillow for more than a couple of years, it weighs twice as much in 2 years that it did when you bought it new. That's how much dust and icky stuff is in there. So consider that. And bigger investment, of course. But if your mattress is more than 10 years old, you might want to consider doing that as well. Mattresses, get all that stuff in them too, unless you have one of those cover things that keeps all that stuff from filtering in. Cooler temperatures are usually better for sleep. And use closed storage. So in other words, not bookcases that you can see all the clutter. Again, if it's clean and uncluttered, it allows our brain to stop thinking about it. So the question is, do we really want normal again? This is, of course, from Young Frankenstein and it's the Abby-normal brain. But do we really want normal in our terms of normal? So when we release this complexity, we can see things more clearly. And this is the last thing I want to talk about, and I'll go through this fairly quickly. Last year, it was 2020, right? Clear vision. You got 20/20 vision, right? But it wasn't clear vision. It was very cloudy. So this year can be a do-over. Allow yourself to have a bigger version, not version, but the version of your vision that is even bigger than before. And one of the things and I have this little quote on here, it's also from Thoreau, not until we are completely lost or turned around do we begin to find ourselves. So you can craft your vision, and this is bigger, and you may want to have someone help you with this, but it's who are you in the world? And what are your strengths and your values? You might want to check out the VIA survey of character strengths, which is at vicharacter.org, and it's free, and it gives you you look at your top 5 or 6 character strengths and do more of those. What do you love to do? And who do you love to do it with? With whom do you love doing it? And how can you be of service to the world? All of us have something that we can offer the world, whether it's cooking in a restaurant or whether it's walking dogs or whether it's planting trees or writing a blog. Any of those things are service. And then just write down those thoughts so that you can remember them, so you don't have to remember them, so you can look at them later and then try to make some sense of them for yourself. And finally, I know it's going to sound antithetical to the Attitude webinar, but simplify the number of experts that you have in your mind and your head and your experience. Books, podcasts, people, all that stuff that's telling those people who are telling you this is the way to do it, including me. You are the best expert about you. Trust yourself. Start just a teeny tiny little bit, and then you can expand it a little bit more because you are trustworthy. Even if you have forgotten to return library books, you are still trustworthy. So I invite you to have a beginner's mind because you've never tried this before. Even if you said, I've tried doing this before, but you've never done it now. You've never done it on this very day. You've never done it with me saying, please try this again. You've never done it wearing these clothes. You've never done it, right? Everything is new in every moment. So be gentle with yourself. Allow yourself to just plain old every day be. We don't do well with decisions, but don't push yourself. You don't really know much about simplicity, right? You've been under pressure for so long. So you need a little time to come out from, as I say, that protective rock and feel the freedom again, or for the first time, perhaps. So I invite you to take something out of your schedule. Remember, you are already using 24/7, all those minutes. Insert a simplicity practice, whether it's yoga or mindfulness or art, something, and then keep the bigger picture in mind. Take a moment to make sure that you pay attention to your vision, because otherwise you'll forget it. Just go back again and renew. You may need to leave yourself some breadcrumbs. Oh, yeah, that's what I did. Once upon a time when I set some goals for myself, I put them on a screensaver that went across the bottom of my screen. And every time I sat down to my computer when it was asleep, that screensaver came up and all my vision was at the bottom of the screen. Oh, yeah, that's what I was doing. So remember, we kind of tend to fall off, sometimes. So you might need reminders, or you might need a person. And I talked about this topic with my husband, and he said, you need to find someone who believes in you. And my husband is that for me, which I just dearly love him for. And I'm that for him as well. But they can reflect back your progress, which is just amazing. So remember that cluttered basement that I showed you to begin with at the beginning? Well, this is what it looks like now. How about that? You talk about decluttering, and now even her children can play in that basement. Isn't that just the coolest thing? And it took several iterations. It wasn't overnight. So the last thing I want to say is a year ago from now, you're going to wish you'd started today. Doesn't make any difference whether it's January 1st. It's January 12th, and it's still time to start. So I invite you, breathe, wash the teacup. All right, I'm ready to take questions.
Okay, that was excellent. I love that photo of the basement, the second one, all cleaned up.
Yeah.
Really, it's so kind just to see. Let's see. Saying no. We've got a lot of responses about saying no. First, how do you know when to say no?
Ooh, great question. Great question. I think it's partly checking in with yourself. Well, let's be very physical about this first. You look at your schedule. Do you have time for this? Is there something that you're going to have to bump out that you really need to keep in place? Or are you trying to squeeze it in? Remember our little issue with time blindness? Like, oh, it will only take me 15 minutes to do that. It won't take you 15 minutes. It'll probably take 3 times that amount. Not to mention the fact that if you divert yourself, you're also diverting your brain into something else. Remember, transitions can be difficult for us. So if you add that in, it can be transitioned into and transition out of, which maybe adds another 15 minutes of I'm just wandering around not knowing what I want to do. So first of all, do you have time for it? Secondly, you have to go back to those questions about saying no to yourself. Is how important is this? When is this going to be? Can this be done later? Is this something urgent? Is like if someone calls you and say, I just cut my hand. Can you take me to the hospital? You're going to say yes, right? So it depends on the level of urgency of those things and importance. And it also depends on your own knowledge about yourself. Can you take on anything else? Is it a one-time thing or is this onward? Is this, I'd like you to take over this support group for the next year. That's a whole different thing. So again, I'm not being very specific because there's all kinds of variables in there. And I hope that helps a little bit, but good questions to ask. And thank you for that question.
One wife, I believe, how do we say no to our spouses and draw a healthy boundary when everything seems to be so urgent to our spouses? So,
yeah. So I think, and we don't have a lot of time to talk about this, but it really involves a conversation. And I don't know whether the spouse is non-ADHD and you are. I don't know what the situation is.
They didn't indicate that. So
let's just pretend that's the case. That, oh my gosh, we have to get it done. We have to get it done. And we're over here going, okay, I have this. So I've often advocated for my clients who are working in corporate America, a boss, and I know a spouse is not your boss. I completely get that. The roles are different. But I had her boss kept saying, you need to do this. Oh, yeah, but don't forget, you got to do this. Oh, and this has got to be done, too. And literally, there was not enough time. So what she did was say, okay, well, these are the things you've asked me to do. Now, what is it that you want me to not do so that I can put this in? And that also works with spouses or partners. Okay, this is important. I understand that. And so these are the other things that we've talked about that are important. Let's sit down and agree which one comes first. And then let's figure out how much time it will take to do that. And can any of those things wait? So it really is about a communications thing, which I love to talk about, but don't have a lot of time to do right now. But really, it's about not saying to that person, no, I can't do it right now. It's not that. It's, okay, what I hear you saying is that you need me to I'm just making this up. You need me to take out the garbage and you need me to go to the bank and I need to pick the kids up and this. So let's talk about which one of those things are the most important. Well, of course it's more important to take out the trash or whatever they're going to say. And you say, okay, well, then let's decide together on how that can work. So again, about communication, and I love to talk about it, but not right now.
How do you turn off your ADHD brain in order to meditate?
Oh, that's great. And so I just want to back up just one second.
Okay.
I think that there are ADHD folks who say the word meditation, it's only one letter different from medication, right? Meditation is a lot harder than medication, right? And they say, I can't sit still. You don't have to sit still for meditation. You can walk and meditate, but you walk more slowly. I've done lots of meditation practice. And one of the things that I found most, that's one of the things I have in the handout, is a couple of references for meditation. One of them, and it goes back to really simple things. I get books that are meditation for kids. And you don't have to shut off your brain to do that. And that's not what meditation is about. It's about, okay, I'm washing the teacup. I'm washing the teacup. I'm washing the teacup. Oh my God, the dog just threw up on the floor. I guess, oh, but I'm washing the teacup. But you have to go take care of the toilet. So those thoughts are going to come in. The issue is you go back to, oh yeah, I'm washing the teacup. I'm washing the teacup. I already picked up the dog's poop, throw up, but I'm washing the teacup. So, and then your brain goes out again, and then you go, oh, okay, I noticed that, and I'm coming back to washing the teacup. And of course, I don't mean literally washing the teacup. I just mean, okay, I'm coming back here again. A lot of us don't do well just sitting in silence. Guided meditation can help with that. That really, really works. And Lydia Zylowska, Dr. Lydia Zylowska actually has some meditations with her book. And she's one of the original people who published about how meditation and mindfulness in particular help ADHD. So the good news is you don't have to set your ADHD brain aside. You simply need to pay attention to, oh, there it goes again. Oh, I'm coming back here. And I will tell you that one of the best things anyone ever told me, a therapist said to me, feel your bottom against the chair or whatever you're sitting on, and then lean back and feel your back against the chair, because that immediately brings you into your body instead of being out here, which is where a lot of us are. And if you can't see me, I'm, got my hands out in front of me. So if you just lean back and take a breath and then say, wait, I'm back here. I'm in my body. And now I'm just going to sit. You don't even have to close your eyes for meditation. Just let your gaze soften. And if you're doing walking meditation, just make sure I have a labyrinth, and the labyrinth is a circle. And it goes back and around, and it twists back and forth and back and forth. And what I like about it is that I'm always turning, so I can never see very far ahead of myself. So simply being present is enough. You don't have to let go of all of it. Just be present. That automatically gets you into meditation.
Mm-hmm. How do you, good question coming up here. How do you, first of all, become aware that your amygdala is activated or is activating? And second, well, I guess you gave some strategies. How do you sort of stop it in its tracks?
Yeah.
Or is that was the counting and everything else that you came up with? But how do you know? I mean, does your body feel a certain way? Do you?
Absolutely. I think if you go back to the slides, it's your breathing will quicken. You will begin to feel emotion. You'll begin to be, it's that little something's wrong kind of thing. Your heartbeat goes a little faster. Your hands may be clammy. Everyone has a different exact response to that. But overall, we feel that kind of, that little electric shock when it's like, oh my goodness. And it's not that kind of, it's not that obvious, but we kind of begin to know. It's like, wait a minute here. It's a feeling of unease, if you know what I mean. It's a feeling of something's wrong here, and this is not good. And then to be able, when you notice that, because the truth of it is that, as Dr. Russ Barkley talks about, is that a lot of times it just goes right past our prefrontal cortex and we just act. And when you're there, then a lot of times we have that amygdala hijack, and then later we're kind of rueful about it. It's like, oh, wait, that really was overreaction to something that didn't need it. And I've done that so many times in my life and so regret so many of those things. So being able to be a little more measured about it is catching those few seconds when you notice it, is getting in your intellectual brain and, counting backwards from 5,033. So that you actually have to think about it. Or, as I mentioned before, coming up with something that is not something that's rote, but something that actually is more difficult for you to. So you actually have to intellectually think about how to put those things in alphabetical order, for instance. Or you have to think about, and I don't mean going to your email and writing email. That's not the kind of thinking I'm talking about. I'm talking about something that's going to essentially be a fidget for your brain, except it's got to be something that is not subconscious. It's got to be very conscious. Okay, I'm going to do the scattered counting. I'm going to do 96, 33, 49. I have to think of those numbers. I have to make them up. So that's what occupies my brain. And I love that question because I think for a lot of us, a lot of folks in the ADHD world talk about the pause. I really didn't know what it was until I found out about this 6 seconds thing. And that's the pause when we have an opportunity to say, oh, here it comes again. Wait a minute. Okay. Scattered thinking, 93, 29. The scattered, the numbers are easiest for me to remember. So I have gotten, in the last week or two, been doing it myself. So that's the best I got.
What's the best app to merely organize my whole life? This one attendee says, I have too many places, notebooks, and apps that I use for calendar items, notes, thoughts, etc. I need a one-stop shop. I wondered if you had anything in mind.
And the answer is no. I don't have time. But what I do want to say is that you sound like many of us, not necessarily ADHD, but many of us who get enamored of the possibility of having an app or a planner or a schedule that will fix it, that will fix all of it. And the truth is that I've tried many, many things. I've tried Getting Things Done by David Allen. I've tried tons of things, planner pads, all that stuff. And what worked for me for years was Stephen Covey's notebooks. It had, sharpen the saw and all that kind of stuff. And I liked the notebook because it was physical and it was open. It was big. I did the great big one so I could write big and all that kind of good stuff. However, what I began to kind of eliminate some of them. So I finally started deleting apps from my phone and my devices, narrowing them down because one might do this and one might do this and one might do this. And I need those things in one piece. What I ended up with was what you're really talking about is creating a system for yourself. And your system is going to be absolutely unique to you. And it requires getting rid of the ones that don't work at all. Yeah, forget that. Even though I don't care what anybody says bullet journals are great for ADHD or not, they don't work for me. Because there's too much freedom in a bullet journal. And someone else may say, bullet journal, that's it for me. So that's why I'm saying I can't give you a really good answer because all of our ADHD operates differently. Mine has different requirements from yours. But first things first, please simplify the number of apps that you have and the number of possibilities that you have because it'll drive you crazy. And allow yourself to use the same principles with app selection and deletion that you do with physical deletion. How important is this? Will I ever use this again? I don't know what to do with this. Did this work? I don't even remember what the name of this is. Get rid of them. And then come down to maybe 2 or 3, and you may be able to combine them. I just talked to someone yesterday who is working with both this is not an app, but she's working with both a calendar, her electronic calendar, coupled with her planner pad or a planner. Another person said that she uses her planner. She says it only has a week at a time, which is great. But inside of it, and it's a physical planner, she puts a monthly and an annual calendar in there because she needs to be able to see all kinds of, all 3 views. So she can see the big picture, she can see the monthly picture, she can see the weekly and daily picture. So it may be a combination of things for you. And I know that's horrible because now you got to think about it some more, right? And you've tried too hard already. And I wish there was an answer for all of us. Man, if we just had one ADHD answer, we wouldn't need any more webinars and Attitude would be out of business.
Hey, thanks.
So would I.
Here's one I think that we can all relate to. I guess this will have to be the last question. Yeah, any tips on how to get through simplifying and minimizing clutter that has sentimental items in it?
Oh, thank you so much for mentioning this. That's really, really tough. So I have 2 or 3 suggestions, and I mentioned these in the Decluttering class. Number one is my mom and dad are gone. And some of you may remember because I was toward the end of the ADHD Women's Palooza when my mom died. And so, of course, everything stopped and we delayed that. But I ended up taking all of her clothing back with me. That's been almost 4 years. I still have her clothing in my closet. This year, I am ready to get rid of at least more than half of it, and I'm going to donate it to a particular organization that I treasure. And that's been difficult this year, because a lot of those donation places were closed for a long time. So that's one thing, is that sometimes you need to hang on to those things. Secondly, if they are physical things, like let's just say photographs and things like that, digitizing those is a really good idea. And if you want, like, especially old photographs, like that are 150 years, I mean, there's some really old things in my family, 10 types, for heaven's sake. They may need to go into a safe deposit box or some kind of, you can even get a home safe if they're that important to you. And for me, I'm sending them to my brother so that my brother can be the repository and he can deal with the issues. But for instance, I still have my mom's silver tea service. I don't use a silver tea service. If you keep sentimental things, they need to be out so that you can see them and enjoy them. If there's no place for them, then you're going to have to either usurp the something else, the place of something else, or you're going to, if you put it away, like my silver tea service was in the attic for a long time. I'm like, what is it doing up here in that silver cloth stuff? Now it's sitting out. Guess what? It's sitting out in my dining room and it's tarnishing and it looks absolutely horrible because I don't have time to polish it. So I'm thinking that may be something that I get rid of. And the reason I mentioned my mom and dad is that there were many things that my mom and dad had that I inherited or, I ended up with. But I will tell you the thing that I treasure most. My dad was a little bit of a cheapskate. He was thrifty. Let me just say it that way. And he would put clips on paper, on potato chips and that kind of stuff. He wouldn't use those clip things. He used those old wooden clothespins. He stored them in a little plastic jar, and that's what I kept, and I use them every day. And every time I do, I'm going to get a little choked up, I'm with my dad. So it doesn't have to be everything, but it can be some things that really mean a lot to you. And you either take pictures of them, you digitize them, but please, please, please let them be out so that you can enjoy them. Because as I say, my mom's clothes are in my closet. I'm in my closet every day. So I'm with my mom every day. And now I realize, I want some more room in my closet and I'm ready to let go of a few of her things. So I hope that helps because it is a very difficult thing. I just want to mention real quickly that one of the women in the organizing group decided she was going to clean out her dad's tools. And her dad's been gone for 6 years. And she said, I'm ready. And she found that a neighbor who was going to buy tools. And it was perfect. Synchronicity, right? It was perfect. Yeah. She went out to her garage and she started sorting them out. She came back. We check in at the midpoint. And she came back at midpoint and she was devastated. She said, I can't do this. I'm not ready to do this yet. So we had her make 3 piles, 1 pile for things that she just felt so attached to, 1 things that were kind of, this reminds me of Dad, and 1 thing, and 1 pile that was, you know what, I'm pretty sure I can get rid of this. And I could either get another one soon if I needed one. But, all of the tools were important, but some were more important. So I'm sure that what's going to end up happening is that first pile will be the ones that she keeps. And she may be able to get rid of the middle pile and certainly the 3rd pile. But again, it's about prioritization and it's about how tender your heart still feels. So don't force yourself unless you're forced to move or something like that. Don't force yourself. Let it still be there. That memorabilia is really important to who we are and shows our connection to history.
Right. I agree. Well, the hour is up, Linda. Thanks so much for being here and sharing your expertise. As usual, it was excellent and entertaining. So thank you so much. I know the attendees loved it.
Thank you. Thank you for and thank you for all your wonderful questions, and apologies to those we didn't get to. But, if you want some help organizing, come to get organized. And in the meantime, we're not going to get rid of Attitude Magazine. Keep coming to the webinars.
Well, thank you. And thanks to all the attendees for joining us today. We appreciate that. Please join us on, 2 weeks from today, January 26th, when Ellen Bratton will talk about how to diagnose and manage language processing disorder in children and teens diagnosed with ADHD. So have a great day, everyone. It was great that you were here.